Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm so excited to be talking about the fantastic Netflix series No Good Deed. And I am joined today by cast members Lisa Kudrow, Ray Romano, Linda Cardellini, Abbi Jacobson, O.T. Fagbenle, and Teyonah Parris, along with creator and showrunner Liz Feldman. And Liz, in starting with you, I wanted to talk about how you conceptualize the idea of really using this house at the center of the story, because it's such a great way to not only overlap the characters' worlds and coming into it, but it also really gives a place of looking at where are their relationships now, but also what is it that they're really envisioning and idealizing for their future and their families and their relationships. You know, all the while you have this family who's selling the house and reconciling with the fact that their life isn't in the place that they'd imagined it building to in this home.
I feel like you just answered the question beautifully. I mean, you just put it into better words than I ever could. I mean, I was very interested in building an ensemble around a common location where we could watch people come in and out, and where, you know, specifically the location was extremely important, sought after, and loaded for the people. Because I came up with this idea during the pandemic when we were all locked down into our houses. And our homes took on this very deep, important, and powerful meaning for us. It was literally the only place we were safe. So I just started realizing that homes are something that, you know, really are a life of their own. We imbue stuff into our homes that you know, make it beyond just, you know, four walls and a ceiling. So my wife and I started looking for homes during that time. I would walk into a new house and realize that there was a story there, that somebody had lived a life, had raised a family, had lost, had loved. And I just thought it was a really good template to be able to tell a lot of different stories, which was something I was itching to do after Dead to Me. I wanted to, you know, go beyond just a dynamic between two people, though the two people were great. I wanted to see, you know, I wanted to be able to work with an incredible, you know, large cast of actors who I really admired and tell a variety of stories that felt important to tell in this moment.
I love that answer. And Lisa, there's so much nuance in terms of the layers of how your character is going through this processing of grief. And, you know, 3 years into losing her son, there's certain things that are a routine, like sitting in his room and calling his phone and leaving voicemails. But then there's the fact that she's physically holding this grief in her hands, you know, the fact that she can no longer play the piano. And so given that she's in such a space of stasis, how did you set about figuring out all the different ways in which you felt like that was going to exhibit in her emotional fabric?
By doing exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
Well, yes, because that's it. I mean, you know, there's a lot with grief and guilt and anger and sensitivity and I don't know, and then you forget about it for a minute and you're funny and snippy. You know, it's just what a human being does. Right? And then the secret keeping is just really toxic. So, and then there's a little bit of snapping, right?
Snipping and snapping.
Some emotional imbalance from that.
Absolutely. You know, Ray, on the other side of things, for your character, it feels like he really struggles to talk about his son, and there's all these emotions inside of him, but he doesn't really know how to express himself out loud a lot of the time. And what was some of the nuance that you felt like that created in really finding how to play him?
That came pretty easy for me. I think I'm not as nasty as that character was in the beginning, justifiably so. He's going through a lot, but I do have a hard time expressing any emotion except fear. Fear I can let everybody know, but it was still finding it from within this character who's different than me. But I just understood that, well, I actually gave him a little backstory. I mean, do you remember that horrible thing I sent you?
You know, he wrote an entire backstory of the character before we even started shooting, where he said, listen, I'm going to do this, and don't even worry if it doesn't match with what you were thinking for the character, but it really helps me,
Yeah,
and I was blown away.
Which explains a little bit of what you're saying, of why who he is at that moment. So I kind of made up that little part about his father and this and that, and yeah, and then it was just whatever Liz told me after that. Whatever you said I was doing wrong, I fixed. Yeah.
He was perfect.
And Linda, in
we
getting
just
to play
lost-
Margot in this series, there's so many different aspects in terms of when is she being truthful and when is she being dishonest, and when she creating a mask to project to other people as well. And so I was very curious about how you went through Liz's scripts and really found your own version of what you felt the truth was of this character and what her motivations for constantly projecting versions of herself for people would be.
Well, I mean, number one, it's just such a fun character to play. And I think that this light keeps going on and off, which is a theme in the show.
Yes,
It's
it
Jacob.
is.
So,
Hi, we acknowledge you. You
acknowledge
don't have to turn the lights off.
I'd really love to give Linda her key light. Thank you so much.
cool.
Haha. Very good.
Well, anyways, it's just such a great character to begin with. And it was very, like, talking about the masks that she wears. I think that's sort of really the fun part, too, is starting from the outside in. And we had so much fun talking about what she looks like and how sort of, insane she is about how she looks in this way, but also that she could be somebody that you could run into at the supermarket in Los Angeles. So that part is fun, and she's always sort of putting that mask on to mask a lot of other things. And she changes very easily with whoever she's around. And I think that she's very good at knowing what she needs to get what she wants and finding that out in just like a few sort of moments with other people. So it was really fun for me to be in scenes with, the people that I get to be in scenes with and sort of figure out what she needs to do to sort of put on the right mask to get what she wants for that moment.
Absolutely. And Abby, your character talks about how she just has this huge compulsion and this need to know things. And it feels like that's her way of trying to create order in the chaos of the world and the things that are uncontrollable. And I was just interested in just finding that energy and that constant momentum that she has of trying to really place things into boxes and give herself answers, even though it's not always possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think from my first conversation with Liz, she told me, maybe she shouldn't have, but she told me that that I was partly inspired by her. So I really look to Liz as an inspiration for Leslie. Energetically, she's got a lot in this little body. There's a lot of energy. I think she's always, I think we all experience this, just she's wearing a lot of hats. She's always thinking. I think she's always observing. And you also, I think, said that you might have been a lawyer if you didn't.
Yes, I always thought
Yes.
if I didn't have a creative bone, I might have been a lawyer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I used a lot of that, and Liz was always around to sort of like observe a little bit. But yeah, I love that this character, she wants this house and she wants this life so bad, and she, as a career, she's used to just looking at everything, and so she's always churning, she's always sort of tea-leaving, like turning around corners, looking for the thing that's unnoticed, and maybe sometimes she doesn't do that as much at home, which is a really interesting thing to play with.
Absolutely. And OT, for your character, he went through losing his father at a very young age, and he's right about to turn the age that his dad was when he lost him. And so that brings a lot of things to the surface, particularly in terms of him being about to welcome his first child and become a father. And so how did that create a lot of space of him just being very unbalanced and off kilter for himself?
Yeah, it's one of the things I find so extraordinary about Liz is that she creates these characters which are so multi-layered. There are so many things going on in every scene, both externally and internally. As an actor, it's like, that you've just got such choice, so many options to try and play. And that's why I think, the show has this wonderful blend of like humor and scares and drama. It's because it's so multi-layered. And so, yeah, for Dennis, who's got birth and death, mixing at once at one time, and love and marriage and caught between, the love of his life and, his wife, and it's a tense time for him.
And Teyonah, your character's kind of got her own secrets that she's been keeping from her husband in terms of her family and having cut ties with her own dad and the reasons behind that. But knowing that she does get to a place of revealing that to him, how did you find what you felt was important for them to build in their relationship for her to really be in a place of trusting him enough to kind of finally reveal all of that?
OT and I were talking about this before. I think a big part of, well, obviously the show is what this house, the dream house, brings out of all of these families, and who you are when it starts is not who you are once it ends. And that's always a fun journey to go on. But I think the house, while it is a dream and while it is something that everyone can aspire to, I think Carla is afraid of it because of what it will reveal in her relationship and about herself, things that Dennis and Carla haven't explicitly shared with one another. And so there is this fear with the house and how that will force her to be vulnerable in ways she may not have wanted to in this moment while she's pregnant and trying to manage a new relationship and a wonderfully lovely mother-in-law. So there's just so many things firing at once that I think that was a fun part of playing this character and figuring that out. But yeah, I kind of lost my thought there.
No, but you nailed it.
Okay, I knew what I was answering at first.
And Liz, there's a few moments in the show where we see, Lydia and Paul's son. We see kind of like a memory of him on screen, and I was interested in the choice to have it be a younger version of him when he was still his childlike self, because it still maintains that pure innocence and naivety, even though they lost him as a teenager, and kind of how you work to interweave that throughout the story.
Well, so much about this house for Lydia specifically, but also for both of them, is that is where their memories are. It's where they built their family. And, I now have a child and, am raising her in our house. And like everywhere I look, even though she's only 2, I see her when she was 6 months. And I remember holding her, when we first came home from the hospital. And you just can't help but project every version of that love into your house. And so, we chose to focus on him as a child also because that's the happy times that she remembers. It's the before times. And, I think we all do that. We sort of freeze these moments, in our memories and hold on to those and sort of, not forget the rest, but try not to think about them. And, it's very explicit for Lydia that it's around a piano and that it's, specifically within the walls of this house. She's probably somebody who would have been a homebody anyway, and then this, trauma that she's gone through has only reinforced that for her. So those are the things that we were exploring with those memories.
And Lisa and Ray, I wanted to come to both of you in terms of just building out the dynamic and finding that space between your characters, because I think there's so many complicated emotions for each of them. They're both people who have a lot of personal grief about the loss of their son, but there's certain things that they feel anger or resentment towards the other one about as well. And yet they also really love each other and have this deep history. So how did the two of you just set about figuring out those different layers and those different moments where you felt different emotions would come to the surface together?
Well, I mean, in the beginning of the show, we're going through a lot. I mean, there is that resentment and guilt, and we're not really, we're not ourselves, really, I don't think. And that's why it was I remember the one episode where we were just nice to each other. And we thought, oh, this feels so good to just be nice,
It's my personal go-to in life. So yeah, it's a stretch.
What's your personal go-to?
Nice.
Oh yeah. Nice.
Get along.
Nice.
To try to
Me
get
too.
along.
Me too.
Yeah,
Me
you too.
Yeah.
So
both really
it was
nice.
challenging.
It was fun. It was actually fun. I mean, but there were times where I'd tell my agent, I go, boy, episode 3, well, I'm not going to give away what I do, but I do some shitty things. And my agent was like, good. You need to do something. You need to do that, So it was yes, like you say, it's against our character, but that's the great thing about it, you know. And we knew that underneath it, we really did love each other, like you say, yeah.
And Oti and Teyonah, your characters, it's really interesting to watch their relationship because they found out they were pregnant just a few dates in. They got married, I think on their 6th date was the detail of that. And they're less than a year in and already about to have a baby. So certain things have been very linear, but then they're also backtracking and doing certain steps out of order. And they're still learning each other and getting to know each other's rhythms. And so how did that create an interesting dynamic and really figuring out the scope of their relationship for you both?
I mean, OT and I had a lot of conversations, I would say, just trying to nail down at what we know about each other at this point, because there were some things where you're like, well, if they're here, shouldn't they know X, Y, Z? And so we had, I would say, quite a few conversations. And then when we got stuck, we asked Liz, like, hey, so what were we thinking with this certain aspect of their relationship? But I think a lot of it was just talking and creating our backstory and how much we knew at what point and what we didn't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's really funny to think of a relationship, like you say, that's like jump-started into the middle, like you get pregnant a few dates in, and then you have to kind of figure each other out. Yeah, and you're now together, like there's no escaping this, and so the secrets and lies and the personality quirks, which might turn out to be like, oh, that's not exactly what I wanted. I mean, I got everything I wanted, but towards my character, Dennis, the many character faults. It's a bumpy ride with Dennis. So it's a lot of fun to play as a relationship because we're discovering each other at the same time the audience is discovering us.
Yeah.
Can I say something?
And Abbi, yes, please.
This is the first time I'm ever hearing the accent. He stayed in character because you stayed in character the whole time.
Right.
Yeah.
Or the first time we're hearing OT without the accent.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh,
It
clever.
really is a little mind-blowing.
What I just
Yeah,
said.
you're very clever. She's nice and clever.
I should go. Someone send me away.
No, never.
Abbi, I also wanted to ask you about working with Poppy Lou, who plays your character's wife in the show, because I love seeing the sequence of events when they kind of hit a bit of a moment of conflict and your character's on the treadmill that she usually never uses, trying to physically outrun her emotions. But you see how quickly they communicate and kind of really pull themselves back together again. And so how did the two of you just set about figuring out what is that central core and that central place of communication that they always find their way back to?
Yeah, we had a lot of conversations as well, and I had known Poppy a little bit before shooting, and I feel like we just found it also pretty fast and felt very comfortable with each other, both, finding that balance, because they do go very quickly from comedy into like heavy, vulnerable moments, and so, I mean, I think that might have been the first.
That was the first scene we shot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which one?
Their like most intense scene on the treadmill.
It was like the
That was
first,
the
we were
first
out of
one.
order
Yeah.
because we were shooting at our house. I
That's
think.
right,
And
yeah.
so I was like, here we go. But I love that. I mean, and that's to Liz's credit too. Like, I love that there's this like really active, energetic like moment where I can play for comedy that very quickly shifts into more dramatic moment that gives you a lot of information about the couple and what they've been through and really reveals what they both want and how they didn't know what the other wanted, which is, I mean, not in my personal relationship. I'm never in that situation, so I had no idea actually what it was like.
Same.
So it was actually really tough to
By the way, that's what I love about this show and other shows where people you see there's a dynamic and they don't know and it's hard to talk. It really is. And then it's just you say it out loud and the other person's, I understand, okay. It's like that's all it took.
That's all it takes.
Yeah, that's all it took. But I love seeing that in shows. I like when the writing isn't trying to be too ooh, we have to keep the tension going. It's like, no, there's more things coming at you.
Oh,
yeah.
You might as well clear up what you can. That's how life works.
That's such a great point. And Linda,
you.
I mean,
Now.
your character is married to Luke
You're
Wilson's
nailing it.
character, but also having an affair with Gwen at the beginning of the series. And did you perceive her as someone who's ever really managed to allow herself to get close to anyone? Or do you think she's always been quite lonely and quite isolated because of what you were talking about before, where she's always presenting this mask at the same time?
I think that she is a person who does for herself first. And I think within that, there has to be an inherent loneliness, because I think there's something about love where you're very giving, right? Or you would sacrifice yourself for the other person is like the most romantic version of love, right? In some ways, in some stories, and Romeo and Juliet times, right? Or not times, but just stories, right? And I don't think she's that person at all. I think she is very much a me. There's some people who are a you first person. I think she's very much a me first person. I think she sees every relationship as or majority relationships as transactional. And I think she just might be missing the chip that would allow her to love in that way, or to even miss that kind of love, which is so much fun for me to play, especially sort of coming off of Dead to Me, which was like the person was completely opposite. It just is so much fun because she sees everybody as an opportunity.
Liz, I also love the choice of the moment that you choose and the song that you chose for Lisa's character to be able to play the piano again, because it's this moment where she's just not thinking about things, and suddenly it's, the neighbor's pink piano for their kids, and she's playing Elton John, your song on it. And so how did you figure out what's going to be the right choice and the right thing that would make her just step outside of herself in that moment?
Well, I wanted the real Lydia to come through sort of despite herself in that moment. She's with a person who there's really no reason to have, a major guard up. She doesn't know yet that he's about to bring up, the death of her son and, his sort of feelings about it. They're just having this light moment. It is in that episode, which is the 5th episode, it is really about these two people escaping the reality of their home for that moment. So she is in this moment of escape, and she it's that time in, those moments in life where your reflex is what takes over. And we just like the idea that, this poor, sweet, deeply untalented guy is, singing and playing piano, and she can't help it. And it's almost like she betrays herself by doing it and then immediately kind of catches herself. It's such a great, beautiful song, and I don't think you'll ever hear it quite the way Luke Wilson does it. So, I just thought it was like, we wanted to see her, a glimpse of who she could be, but, who she won't allow herself to be anymore.
It's one of my favorite
And
scenes.
Lisa, did you and Liz talk at all early on about how you felt like that there would be that physical manifestation in her hands that kind of doesn't allow her to play, and what that would look like, so that then you're able to have a scene like that in a moment like that?
Yeah, we did talk about that a lot.
Yeah.
And I kept saying, no, I think I have that tremor.
It came very naturally to you.
It did.
Yeah. It was written into the script, and, we talked about how the level of it, sort of, how much she wanted to show and when it particularly came out, because it didn't need to be there 100% of the time. It was, obviously a trigger. So what are the moments that trigger that? But I think she did it beautifully.
Ray, one of the scenes that I also really enjoyed watching you in is the moment where your character needs to procure a large amount of cocaine, but he's so far outside of his comfort zone in the middle of a dog grooming place that's a cover, and is forced to sample the goods as a sign of respect. And just wanted to ask about going into a scene like that and really being able to take your character so far out of his comfort zone.
Or take my actual person, my actual self out of my comfort zone. Yeah, it's not the first time I had to snort fake coke in vinyl when I did vinyl. And I was like a pretty nervous wreck, and I remember calling my doctor, and I say, I know it's fake stuff, but can it do any damage? And he actually said, make sure it's this and not that. Make sure it's the lactose, whatever. I know there's 2 different kinds, right?
No, we use real Coke.
Well, that explains the good acting then. But again, it was one of those things that I could easily tap into, because I have never done coke. and I'm
Shocking.
and I'm afraid of no. So my character being uncomfortable was pretty organic, but it was fun. It was fun to do. Yeah.
It was fun to watch.
Yeah.
You and Matt. Matt is hilarious.
Yeah, Matt.
Matt
yeah.
Rogers.
Yeah.
And Linda, with some of the elements that you were describing with your character before, one of the things that's really fun to watch in her is that a lot of people around her, I think because of the way that she projects, underestimate her, but she also understands that and uses that as a tool against people. And so how did you feel like she's able to really use that to her advantage in a lot of ways?
I think that is her an advantage, is that she can kind of size up what people think of her and find a way to push forward. Even if she gets even if a barrier approaches her, she just barrels through it somehow and keeps going for what she wants. And she'll change her tactic, or oftentimes Liz is right, she bursts into tears, and I'm like, I know she's not feeling that. So she's figuring out how to make somebody feel sorry for her and using that sort of their vulnerability against them. So I think she's just one of those people that I think you unfortunately run across in life where you're like, I didn't know somebody could size me up that quick and manipulate me like that. And she just truly has that gift. That's how she sees the world. And like we were talking about before, like if she's been in love, I think she's actually just in love with other things. She's maybe not in love with people so much. She's in love with sort of the material world.
Absolutely. Liz, one of the things as well that I always just love about your writing is just this adeptness that you have in really flowing between different tones and scenes. You know, you can have a really heartfelt moment and a really emotional beat, and then all of a sudden it's a married couple scaring the crap out of each other by crossing paths in the hallway immediately after. And just wanted to ask about the way that you really approach writing and just always thinking about all the different myriads and textures of life in that very authentic way.
Well, thank you for noticing. And but first of all, your questions have been brilliant.
I know.
Yeah.
Truly, I feel like you could write a book about the show, and I would learn something from it.
Yeah.
But I really try to write life as I experience it. You know, with a little bit of heightening along the way. But to me, life is a comedy and a tragedy and a mystery and a roller coaster. And you know, I come from the world of sitcoms, as do many of us, and I got a little tired of writing 3 jokes a page and not really being able to delve into the humanity of the characters and create more complex storylines, because that's, to me, how life is. And so I really just try to write life the way that I feel it. And you know, it is almost like it's almost like hearing a song in my head. Like, you know, it's about dynamics and ebbs and flows. And, you know, just in real life, if something gets really serious, like I'm just going to be the person that cuts through with a joke because I can't handle it. That's how I cope, you know? And just when you think everything is great and that Kamala Harris is going to win the election, shit happens, you know? And like, you would never guess that shit would happen, and that's life. And now we're gonna move forward and deal with it with humor and some tears, and you know, I mean, you get what I'm saying. It's just, you know, it's just my lens, I guess, and the way that I feel is the most authentic way to tell human stories.
Yeah, well, I loved the texture of this show so much and all of your characters and performances. So congratulations on an amazing series, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.